Hello guys, welcome to my shop. Today's a beautiful day. We're going to be doing a top end on this 2021 YZ250F. And then when I'm done doing a top end, I'll be making a separate video with a suspension servicing, front and rear shock. So first thing we got to do is get this seat off and get the battery disconnected. That's the very first thing you do with these electric start bikes when you go to work on them. Two reasons why: you can accidentally bump this start button while you have the top end apart and timing chain all up in there, and you don't want that. And then another reason why is even if you spin the crank, remove the cover and you spin the crank while the bike is off, but you just spin the crank, when this ECU senses the stator spinning, it will send power to the fuel pump and stuff like that. And if you have the fuel line disconnected because you have the throttle body out or whatever, it's going to shoot gas everywhere. Another reason, you just don't want that. So let's get this battery disconnected and we will get digging into this thing. And of course, I believe the reason that they that when you spin the motor by hand, it turns on the fuel pump. It's probably so you can push start the bike. Let's say you're at what do you call them, a hare scramble, and you crash out in one of the corners or whatever, and you break your start button. Well, you're gonna try push starting it. So if you, as soon as the motor starts spinning, it's gonna light up the ECU. It's gonna light up the fuel pump. And anytime you disconnect batteries, you always start with the negative first. You disconnect that first, and when you reconnect them, you always disconnect it, let negative last. But since all we have to do is just break the current here, all we have to do is just disconnect the negative. We can leave the positive connected, it'll be fine. There, then I'll hit the start button. There you go. That last little bit of power that's reserved in a little capacitor, condenser, whatever they call them, on the bike. It stores a little bit of power. So after you disconnect the battery, you just hit the start button real quick. You'll hear a little click, and that's it. It'll burn out the last little bit of power that's sitting in that condenser. So now she is dead. There is no power running to the system. I'm going to go ahead and remove the tank now and the shrouds. All right, got the tank and the shrouds off. On the tank, I decided not to disconnect it. All I did was just flip it around to the back side there, and I used a bungee cord just to kind of make sure she doesn't fall off. I mean, you can balance it there and stays, but I've had them fall off before and yank on electrical wires and stuff, and I don't like that. I've also hung them on the roof before. Just give a strap on the roof here and just kind of like have it hang in here. But yeah, today we'll just bungee cord it. All right, so where do I start? Do I start by removing the exhaust or the air box? I'm going to start with the air box here. And on these air boxes, on these reverse motors, you have the CDI here and the coil. I'm going to go ahead and remove the coil, and I'm going to unbolt the CDI, but I'm not going to disconnect it from the harness. I don't want any electrical problems. We know she runs good. We don't want to mess with success. So when I unbolt this, I'm just going to hang it over the edge here. Now I will disconnect the coil and remove it. It's just this little, terminal right here with two wires, but I try not to fool with these if I don't have to, if everything's going good. The least amount of electrical wires that I have to disconnect in a job, the better I feel about it, because that better ensures that when I plug everything in, it's just going to be a straightforward job. So let me get that off of here. All right, move that so I don't lose it. Go ahead and pop this electrical connector off here. Need a 10 millimeter to take that safety strap off. They started using these in what was it? I think 2018 on the 450 first, and for good reason, because I have a 2015 YZ450, and I have found that this cap can actually come up, the spark plug cap here can come up. My bike didn't die on me, but I found it up about 10 millimeters and just resting gently on top of the spark plug, and that was a little concerning. They do sell, for the 14 to 18s, they do sell an aftermarket piece that straps onto these two valve cover bolts here and hold the spark plug down. What I do on my 15, I just take a little dab of Yamaha bond, put a dab here and a dab there to kind of glue it down. And when I'm ready to take the spark plug out, it's easy just to peel that off. But since I've been doing that, I've never found it popped up off the spark plug since, so that's good. But keep that in mind if you have one of them bikes. Ooh, nice and rusty in here. These things like to get water in them. And it's not coming from the top. Some people think it's coming from the top, but it actually comes from the bottom when you wash it. There's a weep hole. You see right here where I'm pointing back to that little hole in the side of the cylinder up in here? That hole is to allow any water that gets into the spark plug area to get out, and also if it builds up pressure from heat or whatever, or let's say it starts leaking oil in there because the seal goes bad, it allows it to weep out right here. But the thing is, when you wash your bike, you can also push water up in there, and that's what causes the rusty spark plug and stuff like that. There's not a whole lot you can do about it because you do need that weep hole. You just got to kind of deal with it. Oops, wrong size. What'd I do with that 8? There it is. Like I said, we're just going to leave that ECU just sitting right here for now, and then we'll hang it off to the side or do whatever we have to do when we get to that point. But we're going to leave that connected. The more stuff I can leave connected, the better off I feel about it. All right. I'll drop that one. I'll get down there and find that in a second. All right, now to get that the air intake off, I have to take off the boot that connects to the. I have to loosen the boot that connects to the top of the throttle body. I'm not sure if you can see it in there. Focus. You see that Allen right up in there, right up here. Got to loosen that. That is a let's see, size 4. Let me go loosen that up. We'll pop her off. Okay, with a little bit of tugging, I should be able to pop her up. Oh yeah, it should come off easy. Now be careful when you do this. There is, let me pull you over here. There is one connection right here that connects to it. That's your air intake sensor right here. So you have to disconnect this before you can pull the air box completely off. There we go. She's out of here. All right. So now we have the throttle body and the ECU and all that sitting here. We'll let me figure out what I want to do next. Okay, I'm going to get this throttle body out of here. I'm going to disconnect this sensor right here, the fuel injector, the fuel line, and then the throttle position sensor down here. I'm going to leave the cables connected because all I'm going to do is after I disconnect them sensors, I'm going to loosen the bottom bolt strap that holds it onto the boot here. I'm gonna loosen that up, pull this off, and I'm just gonna hang it right over here over the edge. I'm gonna leave the cables connected, so let me knock that out real quick. To get these fuel lines off, you have to drag this little plastic piece up, all the way up, and then it exposes a button here and a button on the other side, opposite side. You have to press both of them at the same time. It's really kind of difficult. You got to pinch them in and then slowly wiggle that off. So let me go ahead and knock that out. There we go. All right. Shoot, normally I have some plugs I can plug into here to keep dirt from getting there and cover this up, but that's actually on another bike right now that I'm repairing. I have that sealed off, so I'm going to find something else to fill these in so nothing gets in there while we're doing this job. Alright, I just put a little plug right here and plug something in there just to keep something from getting in there. Like I said, I do have the right tool to do that, but that's sitting on another bike right now. I'm going to go ahead and take this fuel line and just kind of tuck it back here out of my way. We won't be needing that. And now I'll remove the throttle position, the injector terminal here. Well, here, let me do that with 2 hands. On these throttle position sensors, they to disconnect it, you can see up in here, they like to get dirt all up in the connector here. When you go to press the knob on it to slide it off, to unlatch it, slide it off, you can't really get it pressed in. I'm going to shoot a whole bunch of air up in here and try to get that dirt out so I can disconnect her. Yep, Air worked like a charm. Cleaned her out. You can see she's all clean. All I did was just shot air up in the button area here, and she latched really easily. And then loosening the bottom clamp to the throttle body. Pull this off. Yeah, the kid that owns this bike, Dylan, he's a pretty fast kid. I was actually his mechanic for the Supercross lights about 2 years ago over in Tampa. That was really cool. They hired me to be his race mechanic for a day. That was a fun experience. Although I'm a rider first and mechanic second. What I mean by that is I really love to ride. So it was kind of hard to, watch them get all geared up and go out on the track and me have to sit there with just tools in my hand waiting. But it is what it is, and I still had a great time. I mean, I originally learned how to work on these things because I wanted to ride. My first passion actually wasn't mechanics, it was riding. But it just led to this, and this is what I do. So, all right, we have a lot of dirt right here around the throttle body and stuff, but we're going to be taking the cylinder head off, cylinder off, cylinder head, everything like that. We're going to clean everything up before we put it together. I don't worry too much about cleaning this on teardown, but I definitely do on reassembly. So, you see I got the throttle body just sitting there because I disconnected everything from it except for the throttle cables, and I can just hang it there. It kind of just sits there on its own, and that should be good. Oh yeah, speaking of the Supercross lights, or not lights, Supercross Futures, Tampa. This was actually us right there. That was him, and that was me. 617. Yeah, he ended up getting second place that day in his class. But all right, we're gonna have to go ahead and remove the exhaust. And you know what? I put this bungee cord here. I thought I was so smart, but now I have to remove that. So we'll figure something else out once I get that number plate off. Remove the number plate, the muffler, and unbolt the header here and remove as much of it as I can. Sometimes it's difficult to get this front piece out, at least on the 450s. These 250Fs, I think it's a little easier, but let me go ahead and knock that out. All right, I got the muffler off, the header's still on. I think I'm going to go ahead and remove the motor mounts here, because I have to access these 10 millimeters on the header, and it'll just make it a little bit easier. I'm going to knock them out on both sides real quick. All right, remove these two 10 millimeter nuts back here. As you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. On this one, I'm going to choose this ratchet wrench here. I got that one loose at least. Let me see if I can get access. Yep. All right, let me pull these out. Not sure if I mentioned, but this bike has, I think, about close to 60 hours on it. So it's all original. It's never been taken apart before. I do expect to find this piston in really good shape. He takes care of his bikes typically. I mean, he rides them hard, real hard, but he takes care of them. And I expect to find the piston in good shape, but that's good. You don't want to replace the piston because it's all worn out. You want to replace it actually while it's still good, because you don't want to be out there riding around on a worn out piston. It's not safe, it's not healthy for the bike, and it's just not good. So you do want to get them out in time. It's the same with motor oil. I see some people, they'll drop their motor oil and like, oh, it's still pretty clean, I changed it too early. But that's okay. What do you want to do? You want to wait till the motor oil is like really old and dirty. You've been riding around in dirty oil, and then say, okay, now I'll change the oil because it's old and dirty. That means you've been riding around in old, dirty motor oil. So get your pistons. I like to change my pistons while they're still in good shape, before they cross that line of actually being worn out. And I like to change my motor oil before it gets to the point that it's, no good anymore. So we got them out. All right, the two header 10 millimeter nuts. I'm going to loosen this one up and take that one out. Let's see how I can wiggle this out here. Got that off. This one I'll just pull it out, set it aside, and like I said, these can be difficult to remove on the oh, look at this. On the 250Fs, it's a lot easier. Let me grab that. On some of the 450s, it's like impossible to get these backward motor Yamaha 450s. It's almost impossible sometimes to get this out unless you get the right wiggle, and sometimes I can't even find that. Worst case scenario, I've had to unbolt the throttle body here. I mean, this intake manifold right here, take it off, and then you can get it in and out, this front header piece. So if you can't get yours in or out, just take that off and then you can do it. Typically what I do on a 450 is I'll just leave the front header right here, and I'll do the whole top end job with the front header just rested right on top of the motor here. That way I don't forget to put it in there when I go to put the cylinder head on. That's how I do the 450s. But all right, let's go ahead and get the valve cover off. And actually, let's get to the other side of the motor. We got to drain the coolant. All right, there's a drain bolt for the coolant right here at the bottom of the water pump. It's the one with the little copper washer, brass or whatever, brown color washer. And then you pop the radiator. Oh, I already have the radiator cap off. Allows it to flow faster. After I drain it all out, I like to go ahead and put the drain bolt back in. That way I don't have to worry about that later when I go to fill it up and I don't forget it and end up trying to fill it up and coolant goes all over the floor. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the water pump, or the water fitting right here. I could remove the hose and I'll disconnect the sensor. I could remove the hose and leave that there, but I'm just going to unbolt it off because it'll give me a little more room when it's time to lift this cylinder up between the frame spurs. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that ground strap right there. Okay, all that's disconnected. I have this disconnected. Let's see if I can pry it up here a little bit. Nah. I like to get it to sit right up there. There we go. Keep it out of our way. We'll let that just dangle there. And we have a ground strap right here. I put the 8mm bolts back in here in the holes just so, you know, during reassembly they'll just be there waiting for me. Okay, what's next? I'm going to say the valve cover. Okay, I got the valve cover off. That was easy, just a 2 Allen bolts right here, and you just grab it. Have this little gasket on top of the spark plug here. I'll remove that, get that out of our way. Before I go any further, I do like to verify cam timing on any motor before I pull it apart. It's just good practice. Obviously I know where this motor belongs stock, but you know, when you work on different bikes every day, some can be a little bit different. I know like some of the Cowies have the whole, you line up the exhaust cam and then you count the pins to the next dot. If you don't know that, you'll line that dot up or try to. And some on the YFC 450s, they have what they call the cam timing mod or whatever, and some people do that to their quads where they move the, I believe it's the intake 1-2 advance. I mean, don't quote me on that. Make sure you look it up before you just go off and do that. But and you know, if someone brings me a bike to work on, I like to put it back to where they had it at least. So, but it's just good practice. Always check the cam time before you just go ripping a motor apart. Well, I have to say that is assuming you can spin the motor. If the motor's locked up, or if it's just blown and locked up, not spinning, well, then you're out of luck. You just have to rip it apart. All right, spin the motor. Luckily, I disconnected the battery. At this point, I'd hear the fuel pump going, and it would shoot fuel right out of the fuel line. I have disconnected. And, you know, all right. If you can look in there, you'll see there's, up in here, you'll see there's an arrow. Hold on. Let's see if I can get a better view of it. See that arrow? Right in the middle of the window there, kind of pointed straight up at the line, right at the top. That means you're at top dead center. At that point, that's where you check the cam timing. You have one dot here, it's supposed to be flush with the matting surface, which it is. The other dot here indicating that you have this in the right position. And then over here, it's the same thing. You have one dot right there that's lined up on the gear, that's lined up to the matting surface. And this one, you have two dots up here showing you that you have it in the right position. So as long as you have them two dots matched up on the matting surface and the other sets of dots up here in these corners, that is dialed in. And of course, you can verify by looking at the on this motor, the lobes should be ever so slightly pointed towards each other. Here, I'll get on this side of the motor here and show you. You notice how the two lobes are pointed like at an angle towards each other, but at an angle, kind of like a pyramid pointing at each other. That indicates that, you know, they're in the right position. If this was a regular motor, that's how these reverse motors are. backwards, reverse, whatever. But the regular 450 motors, like let's say it's a Honda or even the previous YFC 450s, the cam lobes would be like this, not like that. It would be like that. And that's important to know, especially if you have a valve that hits a piston, because if you're taking apart a motor and you find out that the valve made contact with the piston and broke a valve or whatever, these cams can actually, the cam gear right here can actually shift a little bit. It's just pressed on to the gear is just pressed onto the cam, and it can shift a little bit. And then you'll do the whole top end, you'll spin the motor and find out it shifted, and either a valve is now making contact with the piston, even though you have the cam timing set right by the gears, or you'll find that it just doesn't start or it runs poorly. So it's good to be able to verify and know that, you know, where they generally are supposed to be positioned. Another thing you can do if you have your motor apart and it's a good running motor is just somehow mark this. I've seen Pro Circuit put a little scribe mark right across. They do it on both cams, and that way you can always verify it's never slipped. So let's say you do have a valve that made contact with a piston. Now you got to do a whole bunch of work. All you got to do for your cam is just look here, and if that scribe shows that it hasn't moved any, then you're good. You don't have to replace the cam. It kind of sucks, you know. I mean, I've had people bring me bikes that they had someone else repair and they couldn't get it running, and it's taken a while for me to figure out, you know, that it was the camshaft that shifted, and the guy that previously did the repair didn't catch that. But since then, I've learned to look at the angles here real quick, and I generally know where they're supposed to be positioned. Like I said, this one's supposed to be positioned like that, and if it was a regular motor, not a reverse motor, they would be positioned like this, or even more like that. Some of them are like this, but beat out basically. And now that I know to look for that, if there's a bike that's not running, it comes to me. It's one of the things that I check. If I've checked everything, it's got spark feel, everything's looking good, valves are adjusted good compression, everything like that, I will run in there, check the cam timing. While I'm looking at the cam timing on the dots, I will actually look at the cam lobes and make sure they are in the correct position. Alright, let's remove the tensioner. I first like to loosen up this 10mm at the end, so that once it's off the bike, I have to remove that anyway when it's off the bike, and it just makes it easier to loosen it while it's on the bike. Let me see if I can get this ratchet wrench on here. Yes, I can. Alright, got that one loose, and the ratchet wrench works on it. So let me see if I can get this back one here from around here. I like to work with the back one first because obviously the front one is easy to get to. Alright, got that one finger loose, so I'll go ahead and finger that one out. Now I'm going to work on the one closest to me here. Alright, there we go. Have her out. And now the chain will be loose because that's the timing chain tensioner. So now the chain will be loose. See, I was able to. So now we can go ahead and get the camshafts out. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and get these cam caps off. You have to be careful when you pick these up. They have these little locating half moon type things in here. And you don't want to drop it into there unless you plan on removing that cover, which we don't, because we're not going to be replacing the timing chain on this one. I usually run a piston, like this bike's first piston. I usually run a piston or two pistons before I change the timing chain. So we'll do this first piston, and on the next piston we'll do the timing chain. So we don't have to remove that cover today. So I don't want to drop anything down there. See, I use this little bungee cord right here to hold the ECU right there out of my way. Hold on here, this tool's dropping dirt. Alright. Got them out of here. Now this is where you got to be real careful not to drop them. I like to take the cap off and kind of move the cap that way, so if it clings onto the cap and it falls, it at least falls over the camshaft where I can retrieve it, like that one just did. I don't know if you can see it, but she's right here. So they just sit right in that groove, so you don't want to lose these. You don't want to drop that down in there, because then you'll be trying to retrieve it with a magnet. If you can't get it with a magnet, then you have to remove that cover. Same thing here. I'm going to pull it off and move it that way. So, and you heard it fall again, and it fell right on the camshaft. See, if I was to remove it and slide it this way, it would fall in that hole. But if I moved it, slide it that way, and it falls over here on the camshaft where I can get it. Now we can go ahead and just pull the cams out. Start with one here. One camshaft out. And the second one. Okay, I think that's everything. I think I can go ahead and remove the cylinder head now. Guess I'll go ahead and start by removing these little 10mm nuts right here. And then I'm going to remove the 4 head bolts right there. And then we're going to be able to pick this head up off the bike. Okay, the head bolts are out and the 2mm nuts are off, so I should just be able to slide her up off of here. And slide her right out the top. Oh, nope, can't get her out the top. Let me go out the side. Oh, they have this little strap here. There we go. She's off. Alright, let me go ahead and get this out of my way. Remove the head gasket, or the head gasket off the top. Collect these before these fall. Well, that one's, there he goes. Alright, I got these. Now we have to do is just take this little Allen off right here, and we can pull the jug right off the piston. Alright, have that out. Slide this jug off. Just kind of want to wiggle it and just bring it up slowly. They do have them dowel pins, and they like to stick on the jug right here and then fall in. This one's stuck pretty good though, so they fall in the crank area. Usually you can retrieve them, but man, sometimes they're hard. So I really just grab it if it's in my face. Alright. So now we got to get the piston off. Let me grab some needle nose. I'll go ahead and stick a rag underneath the piston in case this serve clip goes flying across the room and I can't find it. I won't sit here and wonder if it's in the motor, because I don't want it in the motor, obviously. I'm going to use some really narrow needle nose. That's my favorite way to pull these out. There she is. They do sell tools to press these piston pins out, but as long as it's not too stuck, as long as it's not too in there, most of the time they're not. You can just use a good drift punch, and you just give it some love taps. There it is. Like I said, just some gentle love taps and you can pop her right off of there. Here she is. She's looking pretty good shape. Let me shut this light off so we can get a better view. Oh, The autofocus. There we go. So, you know, a little bit of carbon buildup, probably from running pump gas and stuff. Got a couple mild scratches right here. Because they're below the piston ring, I'm going to say that this is transmission trash. You know, your transmission's always shedding off little pieces of metal and stuff, and it's transmission trash got up in here and put them on a little couple scratches we see right here. If they're above the rings, then I blame that on dirt and stuff getting in the air filter, but he doesn't have anything above these rings. So I'm going to say he's been keeping his air filter good. He just had some transmission trash. I do suggest putting a magnetic drain bolt in any bike, but 4 strokes, 2 strokes, but they're nice in the 2 strokes because they'll typically catch that stuff real quick. As soon as it comes off the transmission, they'll catch it. And then the beauty of that is you'll be able to spot when you're starting to have transmission failure. You might see a huge chunk on your oil drain plug next time you go to change your oil, and that'll indicate that it's time to get in that transmission before you go out and ride it again and then end up with a catastrophic failure. You don't want that. So magnetic drain plugs are good. Everything's looking good here. Let me go ahead and check this rod bearing, lower rod bearings, and the crank bearings, make sure everything's still good and tight there. Left and right is very minimum. That's good. There's always going to be a little left and right. If you got a ton of left and right, more than usual, that kind of indicates that you're about to get some up and down. You don't want any up and down. So what I'd like to do is I go left and right and I find the center point left and right, and then I start checking for up and down. You want to do it right in the center point, because if you have it pressed to the left or the right, you won't feel any up and down. She's good. Then I put my hands on the I stick my 2 fingers in here and put it between the crank half and the cases, and that way I can feel. And what I do is I grab this and I check for up and down. There can sometimes be some left or right in some bikes. This one has a little left or right, but doesn't appear to have any up and down, so that's going to be good. So she's good. I figured she was, because like I said, this is a pretty young motor at 60 hours. I'm going to go ahead and clean the matting surface while I'm already in here. I like to use a brand new fresh razor. That way it's got a clean edge. It's not going to scratch the surface because the edge is nicked or something. And there's not a whole lot to clean off of this. You just look for the trash that's still stuck on it and just kind of wipe it up and get rid of it. Try your best not to let it fall into the motor. And more importantly, try your best not to let it fall into these little oil passages. After you're done cleaning the gasket material off, look in there, make sure that that's clean. If you got to blow it out or wipe it out or whatever, just make sure it's clean. All right, let me go ahead and get the cylinder situated. Pull the gasket off here. Same thing, I'm going to clean the surface with a good fresh razor. Just that black stuff, you just have to get it off of there. Whatever gasket material is left behind. And do the same on the top. You can see how well a fresh razor will just peel that stuff right off, and it won't scratch the surface, it won't gouge it. There's no reason to sand these or anything unless you got a really, really bad one, but there's no reason to mill them down either. You just got to clean them nice and smooth, and they'll seal again. Some of the marks, like that black mark right there, that's just a mark. You'll notice with the razor you can't really remove it. Same with the ring that goes around here. It's just marking the aluminum from the gasket, pressed hard in that area for a while, and that's okay. You just got to get rid of the gasket that's stuck on, and once you get rid of all that, you're good. So now we'll go ahead and clean the bore up here. I'm just going to take some very fine steel wool and work off the carbon buildup on the top edge of the cylinder. And then I'll take a peek in there, see if there's anything else, and she looks good. There's no wear There's no wear up at the top here. There's no gouges or anything, so this cylinder is good to reuse. Alright, in the parts of this job, we're going to be putting a new spark plug in. That's always a good thing to do. We have an OEM piston kit. And then we have some OEM gaskets. The OEM gaskets are always best. I mean, you can get it done cheaper with the aftermarket gaskets, but piston rings, piston will be in there. This nice coated piston pin and 2 circlips that comes with the kit. So I'm going to go ahead and set the cylinder base gasket on the motor. What do I do with my razor? Here it is. I'll go ahead and set the cylinder base gasket on the motor, get the piston ready to put on the motor. And we're going to check the valves and stuff while we have the cylinder head off, but I'm going to do that after I get the piston and cylinder back on the bike. So let me go ahead and set this stuff back on the motor. Scratch that idea. I'll put this on after I put the piston on. I'll slide this over the piston onto the cylinder base. So I'm going to do the piston rings. Got to take the gloves off to do that. It's usually easier to take the gloves off. Brand spanking new piston here. Alright, let's get these rings out of here. Start with the oil ring expander. That goes in the bottom slot. If you ever wonder where these go, it's always a good place to look. Is just look on the stock piston. Obviously, if you've done this once or twice, you know. But if this is your first time and you get a little confused, you can always just look at the piston you pulled out and get an idea how they did this. Got that one on. Okay, I have that ring gap right here, so I know I want the other ring gap all the way on the other side, opposite of it. Yamaha in their manual has instructions on how to position these, and we're going to be looking at that when we get there. But for right now, piston rings, the compression ring, there's a top side. On this one, it'll either have a R or T or something of such. As you see the T right there, that lets you know. That's the top side. Let's see if I can get it focused. And the reason that's the top side is because on the inside edge of the piston ring, there's a chamfered end, rounded off end here. And what that does is it allows the gases to get underneath the ring and push the ring out during the compression so that it gets a really good ring seal. So that's why it is important to have that T on top. They will run if you put them upside down, but you're just not going to have quite as much of a sealing piston ring. You might be a little bit down at compression, but they'll still run. It's just best to get it right though. And I'm going to go ahead and put one circlip on. It's just one less that I have to do while it's on the bike. Alright, this is the reverse motor, so the intake goes in on the front. So start with one clip right here. Let me grab a flathead. I like to start, you have the open end here of the circlip. I start it right here. Hold on, let me get a light going here. This light is not working very good. Alright, start with the open end right here where this where they have the cutout on the piston, and I use my thumb and I press it towards the that way. I got the open end right here, you see, and the ring is going in the groove. So as I use my thumb to press it in, oops, and by the way, I use my other finger on the back side here to hold the piston pin, and the piston pin will keep the ring from just going too far in all the way through. It kind of helps get there it is, circlip in place. And then I center it out. That ring, the opening of the circlip, I center it out where that cutout's at, so that both of the open ends are in a groove. There she is. All right, we'll get the other side on the bike. Don't want to drop a circlip down in the crank area or in the timing chain area. So there we go. Again, you got to verify which side the big valves, or the big relief is usually for intake valves because they're bigger, and the small ones for the exhaust. This dot right here usually shows the exit, the exhaust side. This is reverse motor, so obviously the exhaust goes out the back. All right, I put the circlip on the same way I showed you on the bench there. I don't know if there's a good way to get the camera in here while I do this, but I'm trying my best. Oh man, you're filthy. It's been raining here, and they like to go out there and play in the dirt. And she's white, she gets dirty quick. All right, same way, you start with the open end of the circlip and the cutout of the piston. Then you hold the circlip in with your thumb, you use a flathead and you press it into the groove, starting close to the open end of the piston. There it is, and then I'll take the time to center it out in that cutout on the piston. There she is. Then I like to take a good visual inspection, make sure she's all the way in, and I'll go to the other side and do the same. All right, she's looking good. Remove this rag here and then set the cylinder base gasket on it. Then I'm going to take a peek in the manual and see where they suggest that we put the open end of these rings for this particular bike. All right, let me take a peek in the manual. Well, this is different. Maybe you can pause it if you got to look at this a little bit more to understand what they're showing here. But the top ring, they want it right there on the intake, and then the oil ring, the top oil ring, they want the gap opening right there where the B's at, and then the C for the expander, and then the D over there. Definitely different setup, but let me go ahead and position these rings. I probably should have did that on the bench, but okay, let me do that. Okay, so I set it up the way they requested. The two oil ring gaps, one right here, one right there, with the expander gap in the middle of the two, and then the compression ring end gap right here on the very front side of the intake. So let me go ahead and slide the cylinder on. Here we go. There she is. I'm sure it might have been hard to see, but what I did is I pressed the rings on both sides of the cylinder. I pressed them in like this as I worked the cylinder on. So she's on. Move on to the next. Brand new piston. She is pretty. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and put this end finger tight. You don't want to torque this down yet because you'll kind of cockeye the whole cylinder this way, since it'll only be one bolt holding it down. So I'm just going to hand tighten it. That kind of keeps it on when I'm putting the cylinder head, so it doesn't kind of come out of its location here. Alright, so that's it for that. I'm going to go ahead and check the valves on the cylinder head now. Alright, manual says for the valve clearance here, 0.12 to 0.19 millimeters on the intake and 0.17 to 0.24 on the exhaust. So let's go ahead and check these and see what we have. I got a drag set on this, so I won't strip them out. I just need them lightly seated. Alright, I have them all lightly seated. Let's see where this intake is at. Alright, I was able to get the 15 in there just fine. 0.15, let's see about the 0.18. A little bit of a struggle. So I would say 0.15 is where she's at. And it's equal to both the intakes at 0.15. That's really good. Since the range is 0.12 to 0.19, we're right dead center of the range. So we're doing good there. Let's go ahead and check the exhaust. And honestly, I don't expect these valves to be off, because the way the piston looked, the top of the rings, above the rings, there was no scratches on the piston, which indicates sand hasn't gotten in. That's really the real killer for valves, is sand. When you start getting sand in there, it just erodes the matting surface on the valve, and it causes them to sink into the cylinder and change your adjustment. Alright, I'm going to start with the 20. Nice and good. It went in, but it's tight. I mean, you know, it slides in, but there's a little bit of friction. Let's go to the next one here. Let me find the next one. So where was that 20 at? All right, 23 would be the next. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get the 23 in, 0.23, but let's see. Well, I was able to, but barely. If I wiggle the cam, I can get it in. I really can't slide it unless I wiggle the cam. So these are definitely going to be at the at the 0.20 millimeters. I would say that's where their settings at. So let's see what the manual says on that. Yep, on the exhaust it's 0.17 to 0.24. If we're at 0.20, we're doing good, and they're both pretty equal. So she's good. No valve adjustment needed. I kind of figured that would be the case, but you still always want to check. So I'll go ahead and actually, why I have these on, because they'll hold all the cam buckets and stuff, and now would be a good time to clean this matting surface right here. Same thing. All right, just using a brand new box cutter razor. I'm having to do some voiceover here because YouTube dinged me for having music playing in the background, copyright stuff. So there's a few parts of this video you'll hear me doing some voiceover just to get that corrected. It's the same thing as with the cylinder head. You're just looking to get the remaining gasket material off of the head and the cylinder, so that you'll get a good seal when you put it back together. And that's looking pretty good. Gonna go ahead and wipe her up. When you put the head back on. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Let me go ahead and wipe her up. See, we got her nice and good. These little marks you see, like I was mentioning earlier, that's just scrubbed into aluminum, but you can't feel it with your hand. The razor won't wipe it off. It's just a marking. It's fine. It'll seal just fine with that there. Alright. So now what I'll do is remove these, and then I'm going to clean the cylinder head, get all the dirt out of the intake boot right here. I'm going to spray a little bit of WD-40 in here and shoot air with a long nozzle in here to shoot anything out that might have fallen in while we were taking her apart, and get it ready for reassembly. Also, while I still have the old spark plug in here, I'm going to spray some WD-40 in here and stick my air nozzle up in there and blow out as much as that as I can, get that cleaned out, and then I'll change the spark plug once she's on the bike. But I choose to do this with the spark plug still in here just to avoid anything going through and getting in the threads or anything. And the pressure shooting air in here will also blow air out this weep hole here, so in case there's any cloggage or anything, we can clean that out too. All right, that cylinder head's ready to go. And as you know, we already cleaned the surface on the top of the cylinder here. So let me go ahead and put the dowel pins in there, drop the cylinder head on it, and we'll get the cylinder on there. Let me go ahead and pull this timing chain up with a magnet. There it is. All right, slide this guide in there. I want to make a visual, look down the hole as I slide it in, make sure I get it in its proper seat. And seated good there, yes it is. Pull this as close forward as I can because that'll help when it's time to put the cylinder head on, and gently set the chain just like that, hoping that stays forward. If it doesn't, you can, at least I can push it forward, hopefully when it's time to put the head on. Okay, now just slide the head gasket on her. There, now she's ready for the cylinder head. Alright, let's try my luck here. Alright, now she's ready for the cylinder head. Alright, let's try my luck here. And hopefully I don't get dinged for more music in the background. Easy does it getting over the chain guides there. Almost there. Everything looks good. The gasket's nice and clean, so I'm going to drop her down. The head is in place. Now we just have to tighten the head bolts, torque them down. Let's look up the torque specs in the manual. The head bolts, torque them down. Let me look up the specs in the manual. Alright, Yamaha uses these really weird sequence to, tighten up the head bolts. You first have to tighten them up to 22 foot-pounds, and then you loosen them back up and retighten them to 11 foot-pounds, and then you mark the bolt, or the head bolt. Then you turn it 60 degrees, and then another 60 degrees, going in order. And the order is 1, 2, 3, 4. So you always keep that order as you do the sequence. So run back through that one more time. You tighten it up to 22, and then you do one bolt at a time. You tighten up in the sequence, and then you loosen up one at a time, starting back with number 1. Loosen it all the way up. It says to go ahead and put some more grease on it, the threads, and put it back in and tighten it to 11. Then you go to number 2, take it back out, put grease on it, and tighten up to 11. And then once you have them all back at 11, then that's when you do the whole 60 and 60. So yeah, fun. Of course, 60 and a 60 would make 120 degrees. So that's basically, if we start up here at the top, as it shows, the first 60 would get us there, and then the second 60 will get us over here. So that's basically a little more than a quarter turn. It's somewhere in the middle of a quarter to a half turn, but favoring a little bit less than that. So if you get it to if you get it somewhere in the middle of a quarter to a half turn, but just a little bit less at the end, that's going to be good. So yeah, let me go ahead and do this. All right, I have the head bolts lubed and just sitting in the holes here. So now I'm going to bottom them out ever so gently before I break out the torque wrench. Just going to use this cordless with the drag set to bottom them out. Not sure if I mentioned it wrong when I was looking at the manual, but it says to start with the bottom left. So let's try that. The rear left. Alright, let's break out the torque wrench now and torque them to 22 foot-pounds. Alright, let's break out the torque wrench. Gonna torque them down to 22 foot-pounds. Start with the left rear. Torque it down to 22 foot-pounds. And then the front right at 22 foot-pounds. Then the front left at 22 foot-pounds. And then the bottom right, the 22 foot-pounds. And then after this, we'll start all over again with the rear left, loosen that all the way out, re-oil it, and then put it back in and torque it down to 11 foot-pounds, and do that again to all four of them. And retorque them back to 11 foot-pounds. So now I'll set my torque wrench at 11 foot-pounds. Let's try it again. There it is. All right, I'm going to do the same thing to the number 2, number 3, and number 4 here. Alright, I have them all lubed up and torqued up right to 11 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to take a Sharpie and mark the head of each one of these so we can do our 60 degrees and then another 60-degree turn. Alright, if you look in here, you'll see on the front side, that side of each one of these head bolts, I have a little black mark on the Sharpie. So let's go. Alright, I got a mark with the Sharpie on each one of these head bolts. So let's go ahead and start turning them. Start with number 1 here. Looks good. Number 2. Number 3. And number 4. Okay, then we'll make a second round. Another 60-degree turn for each one. Looks like it to me. A little more on that one. There we go. I have my torque wrench set at 35, by the way. I just like to kind of gauge it, how tight we're doing this when we do their procedure. Looks like it's around 35, where most of them are ending up, maybe some a little bit less, like that one there. But all right, there we go. They're all set at 120 degrees after torquing down to 11 foot-pounds. Now I need to come over here and go ahead and add these 10mm nuts back on the bottom of the cylinder here, and then torque that down as well. I guess now wouldn't be a bad time to swap out that spark plug. See how rusty these things get? It's just what happens to them. We have a nice brand new one here to pop in. You want to put these pretty snug when you bottom them out. Just keep twisting gently until you crush down the crush washer and stuff on it. There you go. I mean, you don't want to break them or strip them out, but you definitely want them pretty snug so they don't come loose. Okay, I'm going to stick a magnet down in here and grab that timing chain, lift it up, because I don't need to get and bind it up. So I'm just going to hold it up with my hand right here, and I'm going to come down to the, hold on one second, let me hang it over so I can show you what I'm doing here. Remember that timing mark I showed you in here, the triangle? I'm going to line that up. That's top dead center, and that's where we need it to set the cam timing. Turn it a little backwards. And sometimes it can be real hard to get it lined right on because of the power. The stator has a magnetic pull to it, but just get it really close and you can verify it once you get it in. All right. Got that set up. Now we can go ahead and drop the camshafts in. I have the marks lined up here. She's at top dead center. If you ever question if it's at top dead center, you can always pull a spark plug out, stick a very long skinny extension in there, like the quarter drive extension in there, and turn the motor and feel the extension go up and down until you find top dead center. Or if you're having a hard time finding that mark, sometimes that helps you find it quicker. All right, start with the intake cam. It's always best to start with the camshaft that is furthest away from the cam tensioner, timing chain tensioner. Since that's the side that takes up the slack. Okay, I have that dot lined up right there, just preliminary. Let me go grab the exhaust. Do the same thing. All right, the exhaust needs to be moved a little bit, about 1 or 2 teeth over. Let's try one to go. Start with that first. I think that's it. All right. Now, before you put that keyway, the half moon shape thing, you want to slide the cam in and out and get it, slide it, you know, left or right like this, and find the spot that it sits in. What I'm doing, I can see a little line right there where it used to sit, so that kind of indicates to me. Let me slide this one over here to match that. Or you can just look at the wear, right? You see the wear marks and you line it up to the head, the surface. But you want to get the cams, how they slide a little bit left or right, you want to get it in their proper position, so when we put them little half moon things in, we drop the cam caps on, it just slides straight down. Now I'll go ahead and pop these on in the groove on the bearing for the camshaft. There we go. Now I'll pop on the cam caps. There's always a cam cap for the exhaust and one separate one for the intake, so make sure you figure out which one goes where. I'm using these little dowel pins right here because they put on the opposite side for the exhaust and for the intake. That kind of assures that you put them on the right one. Let me get a hammer, tap them in gently. Use this little nice hammer here. There we go. And now I'll bolt these down. I'll use this cordless. I got all the bolts in here. I'll use this cordless to do the leg work for me. Since it has a drag set, it won't strip them out. Oh, you know what? I forgot to put Loctite on these. Let me pull these back out and put a dab of Loctite on. Alright, back at it. I pulled them out and put a dab of Loctite on each one. He's racing this thing at Daytona this year. Don't need anything coming loose. Alright. For this part, I'll just torque these down by hand. My hands are calibrated. If your hands are not calibrated, you're known to strip things out or you don't put it tight enough, make sure you break out a torque wrench for this and follow manufacturer specs. But I've been doing this for over 25 years and I know exactly what I'm looking for, what I'm feeling for. My hands are calibrated. It's funny, I had a guy, friend of mine, thought it was weird and I didn't use a torque wrench except for critical things like cylinder heads and stuff, and he was from the he served in the Marines and he was a mechanic for the aircrafts, I think the helicopters and stuff, and they have him use a torque wrench. They had him using a torque wrench on everything, every bolt, and so he just thought that that's how it's always supposed to be done. I kind of had to explain to him that, you know, no, I mean they teach you that way because they know you're only 18 years old and you probably have no experience wrenching, so that's why they tell you use a torque wrench on everything. I mean, plus, you know, they don't need you making mistakes and messing things up. But I've been doing this a long time, so my hands are calibrated. All right, let's go ahead and put the tensioner in, and then we're going to verify the cam timing to make sure everything turned out good. Okay, as you know, there's more than one way to skin a cat. We have to compress this tensioner just to reset it, so to say, so when we slide it in and then we can let it loose. Now these have an interesting feature to them. If you spin, there's a flathead you put on this end, and if you spin it all the way in, I'm holding the plunger in as I'm doing it here, you get them all the way in. Let me get some pliers because the last little bit can be hard. If you give it a little tug at the end, almost. Oh, these pliers aren't gripping it good enough. Let me get a better set. All right. I'll just screw it in this way. You'll see the plunger is going inward as I'm, because I got the flathead over here. All right. Now, if you give the flathead just a little more tug, they usually lock in. No, this one didn't lock in. They usually do. They'll lock in for it. I'm going to try one more time before I go to plan B. I can hear it trying. The problem is these pliers aren't gripping good enough. I'm going to try one last time. Hold on. All right. All right, I'll spin the screwdriver here just a little bit. There it is. See, it locked in. And now to get it loose again, all you got to do is stick a flathead and turn it, or you can rap on it with a hammer. Sometimes a vibration will snap them loose, but oftentimes you end up putting little hit marks, kind of like when you hit the side of a carburetor float bowl to stop the float bowl from leaking. Same thing, you'll see where you hit it. So I don't suggest that method. And then there's another way to do this. They sell they have these little things that sometimes come with the tensioners, and that is designed to go in there and hold the flathead like this. So here, let me go ahead and loosen it back up again. There, it's loose. You heard it pop. And that's what I would have did when I got on the bike once I needed to break it loose. And you can just slide this in there, find the groove, boom, and it holds it in too. And then once you get in there, you just take some needle nose and pull that out. I'll just leave that like that since I already got it in there. Let's pop her in. This side has a up written on it, so make sure you have that side faced up. The gasket there. Alright, let me get that back one here. That one's a fun one. Hand all the way around the shock. Whew, I got her threaded in, so that's half the battle. Alright, I have them finger tight. Now I just have to finish cranking them down. That one. Alright, have that put in. Now I have to do is slide this out. There it is. And if you don't have this and you can't get it to lock, like I mentioned, where you just retract it all the way and bottom it out pretty good, you can always, it's hard, but you can always just twist it in with the flathead all the way, hold the flathead, bolt this thing down. It helps have two people, and then let go of the flathead in there. I've had to do that before. Alright, let's verify the cam time in here. As of right now, I still have that arrow. Here, let me line it up a little better. Okay, the arrow is lined up. See the arrow in there, I think, I hope. And we have up here dots at the flange, at the matting surface. These two are up here. These two are up here. And that dot is at the matting surface right there. So now what I like to do is give the motor one full spin, and I just always like to turn by hand before I hit the starter button, in case I got something wrong somewhere. I'm not going to bend the valve. So one full turn, and then I'm going to check the cam timing one more time. What I'm doing is I spin this so I don't have to worry about watching for that mark, because I just watch the dots up here and I line them back up. There it is. And then I come down here and make sure that triangle is where it's supposed to be. Yes, it is. So we are good. This is going to be good. So now I'll go ahead and stick this back on here and tighten that up, and I'll put these two caps on. I don't need them off anymore. Another thing I like to do right about now is take a feelers gauge. All you got to use is just the smallest feeler gauge you have, but just slide it back underneath each one of the cams, between the cam and the bucket, and make sure it goes in there. Because what happens sometimes when you're tilting the head to get it up in here, if a cam cap ever so slightly pops up, the shim can pop out. Then you bolt these on, and you have a shim kind of halfway in and out, and it has a valve cracked open, and you can't figure out why it won't start. So this is a good thing to check before you go any further. I'm going to do that. And we are good. The smallest feeler gauge is able to slide underneath each one of these. I already checked the valve clearance. I just want to make sure the shims are still in seat and everything after moving that head all around, and they are. So we are good. All right, let's get this valve cover on before we go any further and rest dropping sand in there in the motor or whatever. Something Yamaha does from the factory is on the valve cover gasket, they put a dab of Yamabond on the crotch of each of them little things there. And they do that because if it's going to leak anywhere, that's typically where it's going to leak from. I believe it says something about that in the manual, but I do know factory, when you take them apart, you will find usually that they have a dab, either Yamabond or a black type gasket sealer in that location. got to kind of work at it a little bit here, but there she is. You know what? I forgot to put that little rubber seal in there. Dang it. Yeah, pull it back off. There it is. I got to get that in there. Alright, got it in there now. Got to pop that on there. Okay, I got that in there and made sure she's seated real well all the way around. I'll clean up that goo in a second, but let me go ahead and put these bolts in and tighten her down. Okay, let's go ahead and put the throttle body back on. There she is. And now I'll go ahead and tighten the boot down here to hold her in place. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and connect all the electrical connectors back up. I think I'm going to clean these off real quick before I plug them back in. I know I already cleaned the one on the throttle body. I did that off camera, but yeah, I'm going to clean these real quick. Alright, got all the sensors connected on the throttle body and the field line back on. So I guess I will go ahead and let's go ahead and get the air boot on now. When you're putting the air filter box back on, it's always good to put some kind of lube right there, WD-40 or something, right there on the boot so it slides over the throttle body really nice and easily, because you really can't get your hands in there to work it in. So the lube definitely helps it just slide right into place. Oh, don't forget the electrical wire back there for the air intake temperature sensor. Make sure that's connected, or you will get a little check engine light, and it probably won't run very good either. Alright, that's connected. Alright. And now I'll replace the little 8mm bolts that hold it in place. And I'll tighten them up. Now I'll go ahead and bolt the ECU back down. And then I'll bolt down the coil. And after we get it started up, we'll do some heat cycles to her. He's going to have to clean this filter. I'm not going to do that. He will. I mean, he might be okay running that a second time, but I like to clean them after every full day's riding myself, mainly because the oil that you put on it to collect the dirt, after it collects dirt and it sits all week long, it might not be lubricant enough to collect finer dust and stuff. So I like to do it after every full day's riding myself. Alright, let's get the ignition coil in. Let me clean this dirty thing real quick. Okay, that's better. I think I'll go ahead and plug her in first. Run the wire back here. It clips. Alright, plug that in first. Run the wire back there. It clips onto there. Pop the spark plug cap in the hole so it stays out of the way. And now let me get 8mm bolts so I can put them in. Now hold the coil down. Now put the safety strap back onto the spark plug cap. Oh, backtrack. Made a mistake. Forgot to put the bracket on over the coil. Not really sure what that bracket does, but it was there, so let's just replace it. I'm thinking it probably just helps to collect like energy from the coil being released, maybe. Who knows? Interference. Yeah, whatever the case. Putting it back on. There we go. Now grab a 10 millimeter so I can put that spark plug cap little bracket that keeps it from coming off. I'm going to go ahead and put a dab of Loctite on it too, because I don't want that coming off. Alright, that's everything for right there. Gotta still do the exhaust and some other things. But we can go ahead and set the tank back on. We're getting there. There we go. And back to this side of the motor. There we go. And back to this side of the motor, the right side. Let's connect this water housing. There we go. And back to this side of the motor, the right side, to go ahead and connect the water housing back up to the cylinder head. Connect the electrical connector here. If I can get it in there. There we go. And then bolt her down. And then we'll hook the ground strap up after this. Alright, now let's get the exhaust in there now, before I put the motor mount back on. Before we put the motor mount bolts, or the motor mounts in. Alright, got it out from on this side, so I should be able to get it back in. Yeah, 250Fs are so much easier than the 450s when it comes to this. Ooh, I'm getting hungry. Alright, slide this in there. We're going to reuse the cylinder. The header exhaust gasket. A lot of times you can reuse these quite a few times. I've used them 3 or 4 times, no problems. As long as they seal and they don't leak, you're good. I don't really see a reason to put a new one every time if the old one's just going to seal just fine. And if it did leak them, you're just going to get a little bit of noise and you'll know right away. Put this up in here. Alright, let me tighten all these up. Alright, before I go any further, I still have to hook up the motor mount bolts here and put the shrouds back on and seat on, but I'm going to go ahead and hook up the negative terminal here and just give her a quick test fire. I also do not have coolant in her yet, so I won't be running her long. I'm just going to fire her up, hear her run, and shut her down to make sure that everything's good so far. Since we disconnected the fuel line, they can sometimes take a little longer than normal to start up just because of air that's in the fuel line, so that's to be expected. Let me go ahead and turn the choke on and see what we have. Gotta pull that out. Alright, she runs. So I'll stop there. Like I said, I don't have any coolant in her. I do like to start them up before I put coolant in them, and here's the reason why. If for some reason the head gasket did not seal, if I poured coolant in it, let's just say for whatever reason it just didn't seal, if I pour coolant in it before I start it and it starts pouring coolant into and it starts leaking into the piston area, it might not fire. And then I'm going to be scratching my head wondering why it didn't fire, and I'm going to be checking a lot of other stuff. So what I like to do is fire it up first with no coolant in it, make sure it fires, and as you saw it did. So now I know she runs. So now I will add coolant, and then when I go to fire her up again, if she doesn't start, then I can suspect the head gasket. But that's why I do it that way. And honestly, like, As long as you're using a good head gasket and you torque it right and you clean the surface, they seal like 100% of the time. The only time I've had head gaskets give me an issue is when you start using some of the aftermarket gaskets. They're kind of hit and miss. Sometimes they're good, but sometimes they're not. So yeah, but this one's doing good. Okay, I got her all full of coolant now. Let me go ahead and put the motor mounts back on and the radiator shrouds and the seat, and she's pretty much finished up. Alright, she's all finished up. Let me give her one more fire up and just make sure everything's good there. Let her get a little bit of heat into her, and then I'll flip the throttle a couple of times to make sure she's not blowing any smoke or anything. A little bit of smoke you might see there is just the oil burning off the header pipe from my hands. She's good. She did a little puff at first, but that's normal because of the WD-40 that I used to clean out the cylinder ports. It's got to burn that out, but as long as that smoke goes away after a blip or two, which it did. So she is good. Going to do some heat cycles, 3 good heat cycles, meaning just let it run on the stand like it is, like I was doing right there. Maybe a light blip of the throttle here or there. You don't go crazy with it. You don't want to be like, whang, whang. You know, you're breaking in a new piston. Just a little roll-ins. Vroom, vroom. And here or there, and you just feel the top of the radiator till it gets to the full running temperature. Or you can, for these Yamahas, you can hook up your scanner on your phone and watch the water temperature. If you have a scanner, you just want to get up to about 200 degrees before you shut it off. If you don't, you just feel the top of the radiator until it starts getting pretty hot and burning your hands, and then shut it down, let it cool down for at least 15 minutes, and then do another heat cycle. And in between each heat cycle, you check for leaks, make sure the head gasket's sealing good, all the hoses are sealing good, and everything like that. And then after 3 heat cycles, you take it to the track or wherever you're going to ride. On the first ride, take it easy and make it a shorter ride, maybe about 8 minutes or so, 10 max. And try to avoid sustained full throttle on the first ride. You kind of just want to take her easy. I mean, you can see full throttle on the first ride, but you don't want to be in it the whole time, like all the way holding it 5th gear. Just a little whoop. Just a little short burst. You know, if you need a short burst to get over a jump or whatever, that's fine. But the main thing is you want to keep the temperature from rising too quickly from a sustained full throttle run on the first ride. Make it a shorter ride, 8 to 10 minutes. You come back in, check the fluids again, make sure everything's good, make sure there's no leaks or anything, and after that, you can go ahead and give her hell. So yeah, I appreciate you guys watching this. If you like this kind of stuff, please click like and subscribe, and maybe that bell icon. I have more coming. Up next on this bike right here, I'm going to go ahead and pull the forks and shock off and do a full servicing. I will be making a video of that, so if you're interested in seeing that, stay tuned.